Welcome to Chapter 3, Secondary Data, Literature Reviews, and Hypotheses. In this chapter, we're going to cover a lot of ground here to get you oriented to how researchers go about their work. We're going to take a look first here at secondary data. And secondary data can be internal, can be external. So internal is what a firm would gather and organize and use. External is generated by outside organizations. Now, with the example of Walmart, they collect all the transactions at their cash registers, and that is part of their inventory management system. That gives them great power with their internal secondary data. And so now they can understand what's selling, what's not, which brands are hot, which are not. The brands out there, they have to go to syndicated data companies to get that assessment using external secondary data. So big retailers like Walmart have a big advantage these days with regards to understanding the marketplace. There are, due to the internet now, we have access to third-party sources like the World Bank. The World Bank is headquartered in Washington, D.C., and it's focused on lending to developing countries and doing major projects there for them to help in their development. But here they have data on different aspects of the world's countries. And here, this is about Chinese Belt Road Initiative engagement from 2013 to 2021. And here you can see that in terms of the darker colors on top, Russia has received a lot of aid from China, also going across the Middle East and Africa. Venezuela, not surprisingly, and Cuba is up there as well as the Pacific coast countries of South America. Energy has been a big focus, but as you can see, it's going down over the years. And so the countries, I think, have borrowed enough. China is insisting paying back, but just this kind of heat map down here in the bottom right corner gives you a quick look at 40% of the projects have been done focused in the energy sector. So if you're in the energy sector, if you're working in these countries, that helps you understand what might be coming there and what are the trends in those countries. Secondary data is data that's collected for another purpose that you wind up using. Okay, this can be from government data like the census data. The government generates a lot of data in developing countries like the United States, the EU, Japan. There can be statistical records, books, scholarly articles, peer-reviewed journals, magazines, libraries, diaries that are published out there. When you get your hands on secondary data, you need to scrutinize the quality of this data. So, how current is it? Was it collected for the same purpose that you are using? Might be that your project just focuses on 3 income levels, low, medium, high, but yet in the secondary data you're collecting, it's in 10 different categories. So you might have to do some reconfigurations of the data or just make judgments on how useful that data is to you. And that is part of the research process. Consistency over time, the credibility, the methods used. It could be that the methods were not done correctly. So that needs to be understood so that you could either delete that study or make adaptations. And then you should be considering bias in these reports. Internal sources of secondary data within the company can be extremely valuable. It just takes somebody to go and dig them out, organize them, make them accessible. Increasingly, firms do this, but there are hurdles. For example, many times the IT department owns customer data for a company such as Walmart. So marketers need to use this and they need to get permission. The companies are concerned about lapses in security and customer data getting released to the wrong people out there on the planet. So they are vigilant. There is a concept called customer lifetime value that with records, for example, airlines and having loyalty programs, they know the average spend that customer makes in a year, how frequently they fly, and then how long they will stay with them as a customer. So if you multiply all those together, you can determine customer lifetime value discounting to the future. I'm sorry, discounting from the future to the present. So you understand how valuable those customers actually are to you and their future activity with you. You can determine that in the present space. So this helps to value firms. So firms can actually compute a financially discounted assessment of lifetime value for their current customers. And that is particularly when firms are being sold, that becomes extremely valuable. There is, insights that are derived from tracking customer lifetime value. And generally might be that 20% of your customers are non-profitable, 20% vary, and you have 60% who are in the middle there. Other external sources of secondary data can be newspapers, Google searches. The census is extremely valuable to marketers. There's also the North American Industry Classification System, which allows a categorization of each business in the US. And so they can be grouped together, and then you can do searches on industry or sub-industries. Here you see the example one. This is for cheese manufacturing, and it has a 6-digit code, 311513, in the bottom of the second column to the left. And then you have example two. You have paging devices, 513321 there. The general NAICS code of 51 is for information technologies. And so this, again, helps sort and find businesses. With regards to the census, again, you can get trends like this. You see 3 states here from the 2010 to 2020 who've had negative population growth: Illinois, West Virginia, Mississippi, Puerto Rico. Wow, minus 11.8. Okay, where are these people going? Okay, so then we also have population change by county, 2000 to 2020. You can see in our own state of Wyoming, we have Albany County here. It looks like it's had an increase here over this time period, and the red here is decreased. So you can see some of the rural parts of the Great American Plains have had a migration outwards. When we look at external sources of secondary data, commercial sources from syndicated data, this can be very valuable. We already talked about the brands, such as for Procter & Gamble, and their brands that are selling in Walmart. They'd have to go to syndicated data to really find out what is selling and how their competitors are doing and what's the assessment of market share out there. Media panels are similar to this, finding audience. These are part of marketplace activity, these syndicated data sources. It's the way executives are rewarded and incentive, and so it matters out there. One of those sources is the AC Nielsen company that's now known as Nielsen. And so when we go and look at AC Nielsen, we see that they have done a lot of audience measurement over time. They're now in cash register or single source data for retailers, and it can be a very worthwhile source of secondary data for marketers. And marketers do, for these brands like Procter & Gamble brands, they do rely on Nielsen in their assessments. When we look at geographic information systems, basically the world is digitized, or in this digitized world of computers, with GIS, or geographic coordinates, different layers of maps or information can be overlaid on each other. Here you have the example of the real world, the land usage, the elevation, parcels, their streets. Finally, where are the customers located? Okay, and so all of that can be fascinating and very powerful for marketers. In this example, this focuses on a urban area of Detroit, and really it's looking at what percent of households face housing burden. So the darker colors show the percent of households spending 30% or more of household income on housing costs. So the most dark is 33.8. So basically, these are poverty areas of Detroit and areas that are, it's important to understand what's happening there. These different selections are overlays on education of the people living there. How do they vote? Crime statistics can be overlaid here, transportation corridors, how people get around there. All of that can be put on these maps, can be very valuable for marketers. Here's an example of from Ace Hardware geocoding from Phoenix. See, the red dots are customers from one Ace Hardware store. And as they move forward here in the example, now the zip codes are overlaid here on where the customers, the red dots, are. We also see that we can have household income with the dark red being the highest income. And it looks like the customers here are in like the $35,000 to $60,000 range of income here. And then finally, these views can be, tacked back and forth by the marketers. So you're really seeing how the customers here are in lower income neighborhoods. They're clustered together here. Here's the store that is of focus here. And so now mailings for advertising, direct mail, can be done more efficiently to the correct zip codes here and getting lists of people and residents who live there. This has proved to be valuable for Ace Hardware in Phoenix, and they found that 85% of their customers came from 3 zip codes, and their advertising became much efficient after that. Now, working up a literature review after synthesizing secondary research can be valuable. So looking across what's available there for secondary data and then assessing the relevance of it and then making it part of a literature review can be valuable. These days, with the internet and Google, you can find out what your clients are doing and school yourself on their industry and maybe some of the activity that they have in their local market. I remember being in Atlanta, having to brief a customer of ours, SDR Incorporated. We were a research agency, and the customer was a bank in Minnesota. And so I spent 2 hours studying the banking industry and commercial banking for customers. What were the trends? Customer service was a high item there of priority for these service business industry that was just transitioning to really understand their customers after being deregulated. I found it when I interacted with the bank's customers, I'd ask them, is customer satisfaction a important topic for you these days? And then they said, yes, of course it is. So then we were off and running, and I was able to weave in the results of the study, hitting that topic of customer satisfaction, and then finally making recommendations to them based on just my knowledge of the industry. And I didn't say these are the things you have to do, but I was saying from my readings and understanding of your industry, it would make sense to take these steps. For example, maybe putting the customer relationship officer out in the lobby, easy to find. And so that person could be easily found by the bank tellers and also the customers there. And that was just one of the recommendations. The literature review can help conceptualize a model. And so how variables influence each other, maybe in a causal sequence, that is very valuable. That's much in line with what academic researchers do. So a variable would be maybe something like service quality, customer satisfaction, brand attitude. It'd be a column in a spreadsheet, and then your customers being the rows that have different ratings for your firm based on their perceptions of your firm on value, customer satisfaction, brand attitude in those three different columns. Constructs, the Maven construct is one here where it's measured with 6 different questions on a survey. So I like introducing new brands and products to my friends. I like helping people by providing them with information about many kinds of products. These kind of questions allow a triangulation of the construct, this idea that you're trying to measure. It exists in the mind of customers, but we can't surgically remove it. It's in a network of neurochemicals in your customers' brains. It's activated when they are asked about your brand and being market mavens. The development of hypotheses is important, and basically we're trying to understand whether relationships between constructs are positive or negative, and then what's the strength of those relationships. In a standardized form, they probably go from -1 to +1, with those being strong relationships, either a negative one or a strong positive relationship. A 0 would represent they're independent. They don't seem to move together. So this conceptualization identifies these variables, and it's an important part of sorting out an area. Service quality is one area that academic researchers at Texas A&M University helped sort out in the 1980s. They developed a small set of questions. I think it's probably about a dozen questions now, but anyway, it's called ServQual. So different dimensions of service quality that became very important to the service industry, hotels, airlines, banks, restaurants. Here's what a model might look like. Here you have the customer's income, the customer's education, their openness to learning. All those are positive related to the new technology adoption. And then technology discomfort would be negatively related to new technology adoption. And so with survey measurement and then statistical techniques like regression or structural equation modeling, you'd be able to find out the strength of these relationships. And maybe they're close to 0, so they would not actually be relationships at all. Hypotheses, each of those previous links between income and new technology adoption would represent a hypothesis, so a testable proposition. These begin with a null hypothesis, which typically represents there is no relationship between these variables. And then the alternative hypothesis states that there is a relationship. So if you find a strong relationship, then you would reject the null hypothesis that there is no relationship. You would do that using statistical analysis. We'll do that later in our class here. You also have, and here's an example, a two-tailed test. So we're not saying that, let's say two groups, you might have men and women, is there a difference between them in their attitude toward a brand? And so here we would sort the data into 2 groups, that being data pertaining to males, data pertaining to females, and then we compare their mean values on this attitude toward the brand. And then we would see if that difference is far from 0. So the midline here in this symmetrical graph at the bottom of the frame is represents in a standardized form 0, no difference. And then as the differences became greater, subtracting the males from the females, you would be able to see whether that difference value in a standardized sense is out here in the tail areas that would represent like 2.5% here, 2.5% there under the curve. And if it is, then you'd have 95% confidence that you could make a rejection here that of the null hypothesis, and then you could say that, or keep going with the idea that the 2 groups are different. Okay, going back to the information value chain, we have data, information, knowledge, decision-making, implementing action. Okay, more value is acquired for researchers as they move across these different blocks in the information value chain. And in business, the businesses are trying to get here to take action to make money. Now, with regards to researchers, and particularly academics, when they get to hear decision making, they're making decisions about constructs, models, methods used. And this is where their power comes from. And when they do that, they can come off looking like geniuses. And so that's what their value to their decision makers. Okay, so they're not in the role of making decision, but they are close at hand, like Kit Carson was traveling the West with explorer John C. Fremont and making recommendations about uh, what's over the horizon. And in many studies, it has to do with constructs, models, and relationships between variables, and maybe the methods that are used. That concludes our chapter 3, and we look forward to being with you here in the literature review chapter. Thank you.